Generally, people understand what they should do in the early rounds, right? I mean, it's more so, okay, do I take Tyreek Hill? Do I take Cooper Kupp? But regardless, you're never going to make a massive mistake in round one. You're never going to make a massive mistake in round two, or at least you shouldn't. But what I find is once you get to the later rounds in those casual redraft leagues, people just throw their draft picks away. They go through and they take someone like Tyler Boyd, they take someone like Darnell Mooney, where it makes just literally no sense for a multitude of different reasons. I'm going to go through and outline exactly what you should do in the later rounds in your 2023 fantasy football drafts, specifically if you are playing in a casual redraft format. Of course, these are going to be leagues where you have a shallower bench. These are going to be leagues where you most importantly have access to the waiver wire, and we're going to be making moves early on. Now, of course, if you are playing on Underdog, where it's best ball, where you're not going to be making those moves during the season, this video is not going to help you. I'm sorry. This is going to be for those redraft formats. But first, let's outline the things that we should be avoiding before we get into the late round targets I want to talk about in this video. First off, there's no reason to take a suspended player at all, unless it's going to be like a truly elite level option, right? But if you're looking at someone like Jameson Williams, if you're looking at someone who, say, like Alvin Kamara may get suspended at the beginning of the season, if you were to go through and draft Jameson Williams, even if you get him at a quote-unquote discount in your casual redraft league with the shallower bench, you are going to be making a mistake almost regardless of what happens later in the season. The reason being is it is so crucial to open up those last few bench spots that you have where we can go through and we can churn the waiver wire, right? We want to be the guy picking up and being able to start Isaiah Pacheco for free off waivers. We know weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, that's when we're going to be able to identify the players that have a real shot to win you your fantasy league off the waiver wire. And what happens is if you draft someone like Jameson Williams, who's going to miss the first 6 weeks of the season, guaranteed, he is going to be taking up one of those roster spots and you are not going to be able to play the waiver wire. It just can't happen. You're going to be in a spot where you're saying, okay, well, hell, am I really supposed to go out there and cut Elijah Mitchell to go pick up this speculative running back? I know I can't cut Jameson Williams. That roster spot's dead. And it puts you in such a compromising position where the opportunity cost that you're going to have locking up that one roster spot really does not make sense. Now, of course, there's a massive asterisk on this. You need to understand your league settings to the best of your ability, because if you can draft Jameson Williams and then throw him on the IR if he's suspended, and in some leagues you can't do that, then he's a phenomenal pick, right? Then, of course, you're willing to go through and draft those suspended players. But now the next guys that you should not be looking to draft, very similar to rule one here, is in these leagues, when you don't want to be wasting the bottom few roster spots that you have on the bench, there's no reason in going through and drafting players that are going to miss the beginning of the season with an injury. Now, of course, this is the same asterisk, whereas if you can put that injured guy on the IR, then it's a little bit different. Then at that point, sure, go grab Kyler Murray. Sure, go grab Javonte Williams. But if instead he's going to be wasting that roster spot on the bench and you're just going to be playing the game, okay, when does he come back? When can I actually use this player? Someone like Wan'Dale Robinson, who I love in those underdog best ball drafts. Someone like Javonte Williams, who I actually don't mind in like Best Ball Mania on Underdog, right? Or same thing with Kyler Murray. Like, you'll see me on the live streams, which you do every single day, draft a lot of Kyler Murray in Underdog drafts, because I can understand that if he misses the beginning portion of the season, but in an Underdog tournament where, like, if you're looking at Best Ball Mania, with it being a $25 buy-in, $15 million prize pool, and we're trying to optimize for the fantasy football playoff tournament weeks 15, 16, 17, if Kyler can be elite, then it makes sense, because we don't have a waiver wire on Underdog as well. It's best ball, no time commitment during the year. So how you know I drafted 700 teams and won $150,000 on Underdog last year. And of course, if you want to get in a draft with us, which we're doing every single day on the live stream on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the live chat. You can find it in the description in the comment section. If you sign up for Underdog with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Plus, you're going to get my 2023 fantasy football rankings and a free trial to flockfantasy.com as well. Available in damn near every state. You can see the states here. But going back to what we're talking about in these traditional redraft leagues, having that access for an elite ceiling in weeks 15, 16, 17 doesn't really mean as much if we're having to waste our ability to play the waiver wire. So I really don't want to be taking those injured players, because you also have to think about the trade market in your league, right? Where if you have someone like Javonte Williams, you have someone like Jameson Williams, where maybe you take them in the middle rounds of your fantasy football draft this year, and you're saying, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to be able to go through and I'm going to be able to have them accrue value as they get closer to returning, which in theory should be how it works, right? Regardless of if it's like a suspended player or an injured guy, say in theory, Jameson Williams is going to come back week 7 this next season. And then what should happen is every week that we get closer to week 7, his value goes up and up and up and up ever so slightly until we get to week 7 and he's valued appropriately when he's about to play. But in reality, what actually happens in these fantasy football leagues, if you take that injured guy that's not playing, if you take that suspended guy that's not playing, he actually loses value at the beginning portion of the season. In weeks 2, in weeks 3, when everybody's thinking, okay, who can I get into my starting lineup? How's everybody performing? We finally have football. We can finally see guys on the field. Nobody wants to be trading for a suspended player. Nobody wants to be trading for an injured guy. You're actually not going to see his value go much higher until the week before he returns. So there's just really no reason. You lock up a roster spot. At the same time, you lose trade value by making that selection. So be avoiding those guys unless you can put them on the IR. Now, the third type of player that we should be avoiding is someone where you're confident what they're going to be this next year, but at the same time, they don't have an extremely high ceiling. And for example, if we're going to go to a bunch of wide receivers that may be in play to be high-end wide receiver 3s, right? Like Tyler Boyd, Darnell Mooney, Michael Gallup, Tyquan Thornton, Nico Collins. All of those guys are going as like wide receiver 5s, wide receiver 6 in drafts right now. And if you take, say, Tyquan Thornton as a wide receiver 6 in your underdog league, and then all of a sudden he turns out to be your wide receiver 3, that's a great pick, right? And it actually does make a difference in that type of format. However, if you're in like a casual redraft league and you draft someone like Michael Gallup, who projects to be like a wide receiver 5 in fantasy, and he exceeds expectations and he ends up being a wide receiver 3 instead, does that pick move the needle for you? Does that help you? No, it doesn't. In reality, it does nothing, because you're always going to be able to go to the waiver wire. You are always going to be able to find a wide receiver that projects to see 8-9 fantasy points per game. So going and picking up the Tyquan Thornton, going and picking up the Nico Collins, the Darnell Mooney, the Tyler Boyd, all these guys are pretty comparable to options that you should have on the waiver wire every single week during the season. So there's no reason to draft those guys in your fantasy football draft. And instead, the players that we should be focusing in on are players that have actual upside. Players that you could see turning into top 24 options at their individual position, while at the same time giving us clarity very early on. Because I want to stay fluid. I want to be as flexible as possible with those last few roster spots. I want to take someone that is going to be in a bucket of 2 camps. He either is easily cuttable by the time we get to week 1. That way we can look at the overall landscape, pick someone up off the waiver wire that's going to be exciting. Or if he does hit, he will actually make a difference in our league. So let's go through and let's look at some names like this. I'm pulling this from ESPN ADP. Now, of course, if you are in underdog drafts, going to be a little bit different. The ADP in underdog drafts going to be much more difficult to actually go through and take advantage of, specifically because those underdog drafts have like millions of dollars of drafts being drafted very often. So, I mean, the best drafters are there. But nonetheless, if you pull this up, I mean, first example, Elijah Moore is going at pick 161 in ESPN drafts. So Elijah Moore is someone that you can get in the last round or the second to last round of your draft pretty much. And with Elijah Moore, I would say that he is someone by the time we get to weeks 2 or 3, you're going to know what's happening, right? I mean, if Elijah Moore actually ends up being the wide receiver 2 in this Cleveland Browns offense, if Deshaun Watson has that big bounce back, if Elijah Moore goes back to what he was his rookie season rather than year 2, hell, yes, Elijah Moore in that role can end up being a top 24 wide receiver in fantasy, and he can actually make a difference for your team. Whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, say we get there and Donovan Peoples-Jones is playing ahead of him. Say we get to the start of the season and Elijah Moore looks like he did a year ago. Then at that point, if you took him into the second to last round, the third to last round of your fantasy football draft, it's an easy spot to go through and cut him in week 3 and pick someone new up off the waiver wire. Now, our next guy, I'd say pick 156, Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell kind of fits the same mold, right? I mean, if you're looking at the player props on Underdog right now, they have Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey, very similar in terms of their overall rushing yards. And the reason being is with Elijah Mitchell, he projects to be in that split backfield with Christian McCaffrey. Now, of course, there's always the shot that instead you have Christian McCaffrey going and turning back into what he was in Carolina, a true 3-down workhorse. And if that happens, Elijah Mitchell has an ADP of pick 156. So you're taking him in one of the very last rounds of your draft. He's an easy cut. You can go ahead. You can move on from Elijah Mitchell. It's not working out. But there are two different things that could happen. One, Elijah Mitchell actually does have a large role in this offense. And hell, maybe he's worth the pick on that front. Or also, what happens if we take Elijah Mitchell now, then Christian McCaffrey goes down in the preseason, say he has a ankle sprain, and at the start of the year, you have Elijah Mitchell as the running back one in the Kyle Shanahan offense. So generally with these later round picks, I'm always trying to go ahead and grab a running back. Now our next guy, I mean, he's just so damn late. You can literally get him in the last round of ESPN drafts. Rashad Bateman is somewhat interesting to go ahead and pick up. Now I know Bateman falls in the camp of those injured guys that we were saying to avoid earlier on. And obviously it is a little more of a gray area, right? It's football. We have players that are going to be dealing with nagging injuries, but I would say Bateman, if you're getting him in the last round of your fantasy football draft as well, it can be very clear cut. So say we get to the start of the season and Rashad Bateman's still dealing with an injury. He's not fully recovered. Cut him. Who the hell cares? You took him in the last round. Go pick up someone off the waiver wire. Or even if we get to the start of the year and you go, oh my gosh, Odell Beckham Jr. is actually back. Odell Beckham Jr. is the wide receiver one in this offense. Or, oh, Zay Flowers is looking like the best rookie wide receiver this season. Bateman, at best, is the wide receiver 2 in this offense, maybe even the wide receiver 3. Then we're going to have no issue cutting him. But there is a world where Bateman comes out and week 1, week 2, week 3, regardless of whenever it is, he shows he's the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore, and he actually has the upside to be a top 24 option at the position and move the needle for you. That's someone that we're looking to take. Now, these other 3 guys, I mean, are just the best examples of players that you should take in the very last round of your ESPN draft, your Yahoo draft, whatever it is, and then you will be fine cutting them before we even get to week 1. Because we know in the preseason, we know in training camp, there are going to be players that are popping up in the news, like Isaiah Pacheco was popping up in preseason, in training camp last year, and maybe you wanted to go ahead and make a move for him then. Leonard Fournette, ADP 219. Perfect example. Go ahead, draft him in the last round, and say, okay, well, it's essentially just me putting an early waiver wire claim on Leonard Fournette if he signs somewhere. Because then if Fournette goes to Miami, if Leonard Fournette goes to Kansas City, and all of a sudden he looks like he can potentially be a league-winning running back, and hell, even if you don't believe in him, you could go ahead and look to sell him high. That's a very bimodal range of outcomes, right? He's either on a team and looks to be in a good role, and at that point, we can go ahead and we can keep him, and we can be excited about it. Or he's not on a team, and it's not hard, we can go ahead and cut him, and don't have to think twice about it. Say the same thing with Kareem Hunt, who's picked 227. If Kareem Hunt signs in a good spot, yeah, keep Kareem Hunt, and you're excited about it. If he doesn't sign, let's go ahead, let's cut him. No harm, no foul. I mean, whereas on the other end of the spectrum, if you take Nico Collins, how are you getting that clarity? If you take Tyquan Thornton, how are you getting that clarity? If you take Michael Gallup, what's really happening there? Even if they project to have many more points from a median projection standpoint than a player like Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt this next season, what's going to end up happening is you're just going to have them on your bench. Well, you kind of know what they are. They're never going to be great. They're never going to be that bad. And they're going to be clogging a roster spot. And it's better spent with someone that has real upside that we could cut if it doesn't play out. And then the last example that we will have here, and you know we have to throw him on a video. You know we have to talk about him. Trey Lance is a very similar situation to what we have with some of these running backs. You'd say with Trey Lance, a lot of people are saying that he has no shot to be the starting quarterback in San Francisco this next season. I beg to differ, but I'm at least reasonable enough to say, yeah, there's a shot that it's just Brock Purdy, right? There's a shot we get to week 1 and Brock Purdy is the starter here. Trey Lance is the backup. And at that point, super, super easy cut. But if Lance is all of a sudden the starting quarterback, and he's throwing to George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, and he has the rushing upside to be a top 5 rusher at the quarterback position in the NFL as well. This is someone that could be a top 5 to 6 quarterback in fantasy that you could get in the very last round. And very similar to Leonard Fournette, very similar to Kareem Hunt, very similar to Ezekiel Elliott. You can go down the entire list. We will know by the time we get to week 1 Is this someone we are keeping? Is this someone we are getting rid of? It's not going to be that gray area where he's just a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, where it's like, okay, does this guy ever move the needle? But can I ever cut him? So I really hope this video is able to help y'all out. I mean, I think that it's very, very important to make sure you're constructing your roster with the right type of players at the very end. But of course, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to get in a draft with us, or if you want to go check out any of those player props, they're both on Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link to Underdog in the description, in the comment section of this video. And if you sign up with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com, and hell, I mean, you can have some fun, get into a draft with us, which we are live streaming every single day until 2024. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Really appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope that we get to see you in a draft later today.